Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robin, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Welcome to today's episode. This is Robin. And if you're listening to this when it's dropping in real time, we're in the middle. We're in that, for some of us, that messy middle in between the holiday season while we are kind of celebrating all the different things, but also that time in between where a lot of our kiddos aren't in school if we have kiddos. And again, it's sometimes this kind of lost, this no man's land, this no person's land. And so thinking about where we are again, if you're listening to this as to when it comes out, I just want to hold space to say, like, I'm just so glad you're here. I'm so glad that we can keep the conversations going and the reflections going. And above all else, I want this to be useful. So I thought it'd be timely to share with you some of my thoughts about rolling into 2026. So I appreciate, like, this is hype cycle central. Like, this is when the new year, new you stuff starts coming in our feeds. This is, gosh, I can't even imagine how many resolutions are made at this time of year, thinking about getting, like, this is the year we're going to get our ducks in a row. Like, I mean, like, really get our ducks in a row. One of the ideas that I find so fascinating is that they actually have a date that's identified. It's usually around January 18th, when I think it's something wild, like 80% of all resolutions have been abandoned by this point. And it's this kind of idea of like the reckoning day, where our best intentions often fall short by this point. And I love it. It's Jay Papasan who introduced this word to me, this kind of notion about like Groundhog Year, that like we just keep repeating the same kind of thing over and over and expecting, obviously different results. But what's so remarkable is what I think is fascinating when we look at behavioral change and, the hype cycles, new year, new you, all of that stuff, is when these promises don't come to fruition, because so many of them are based on flawed science, a lot of bro science, and there are just a lot of poor information in there. It's business for the most part, is that we don't look at it and say, wow, that system didn't work, that product didn't work, that course, that program didn't work. We think that like we didn't do it well enough, that there's something wrong with us. Rarely do we look at it and be like, wow, that was defective. Yet our internal dialogue, if we're not careful, could be extremely negative and self-criticizing. But again, it's not that we look at the system and say, hey, I don't think that worked really well. We internalize it. We think that we didn't do enough. Now, I wanted to just hold space to offer a few invitations for us. First and foremost, oh, there you go. Puppies say, Happy New Year, everyone, or Old New Year's Night, however you celebrate. Anyway, the first kind of big idea here is that we can actually not buy into all of this. Like, we are actually able to say, no, I'm good, pass. And January doesn't need to represent this new year, new you. My invitation, if anything, is to like release some of that sense of urgency that many of us feel starting something new, that like we have to figure it out, we have to get it right, everybody else is getting it right. Just imagine, just for a moment, like just imagine, hold space to be like, what would it feel like if like we met January with a much kinder pace? This idea that we actually explore like how much capacity do we have right now versus enough motivation and willpower and discipline. Because when we know about habit formation, habits don't stick because we want them bad enough. They stick when they fit our lives and our energy and our real capacity. Now, in the true Alan Stein Jr. fashion, I'll say that again. Habits don't stick because we want them bad enough. They stick when they fit our lives and our energy and our real capacity. So my invitation is to think about, what pace will let me stay well going into this new season that will allow me to still show up for the things that matter most. One of the practices we often talk about in my stress lab is an exercise that's called feeling casting. So, feeling casting isn't thinking about the thing per se, it's thinking about the sensation or the feeling that you're hoping to achieve. So, if I'm asking myself, what pace will allow me, or what pace do I want to be showing up at in January? And then I say, okay, well, I want to be steady. I want to feel so regulated. I want to feel like I am on the right track. I want to feel as this I am grounded. I'm able to make what matters most matter most. I'm just like really locked in. The question would be, okay, so what behaviors would make this more likely or more possible? Well, something that I know is getting a really great night's sleep. When I'm well resourced in terms of my biology, I know I show up in a different way. What would it look like in terms of the pace? Well, getting out ahead of my calendar and maybe blocking intentional some time in my calendar before I have to try and fit well-being and recovery and rest in my calendar. I want to get out ahead of it. I want to make sure that it's already there. And then that way, when other things get brought into that calendar, we work around them. So we don't have to try and play this. I'll try to squeeze in recovery and rest. I want to get ahead of it. So, what I hope I showed you in that illustration, or that example, sorry, is to illustrate that by us identifying how I want to feel, thinking about some key behaviors that are going to help us get there, it changes the feeling or that kind of association that, like, what I'm doing right now isn't good and I have to change it, that there's something wrong with me. No, no, I just want to readjust in a way that's going to help me meet my goals. So, when we think about this, again, it's allowing us just have that permission to start, like, kind of in this playground of doing a day by design. Like, what would a month by design look like? What would a week by design look like? What are some of those areas? And if at all possible, if you're able to make data informed decisions, it makes it so much easier. And what I mean by that, if, for example, I know in my own practice, one of the things that I observed after 5 years, for example, of speaking and being on the road, rarely in those 5 years have I ever had a Monday keynote. Apparently, we're not really big keynoters on Mondays. So instead of having this like open ended, let's book calls, whenever I can fit them around my schedule, the likelihood is, again, Mondays don't usually involve travel or keynotes. So instead of just trying to fit things in, as I said, what I did partway through this year is just made my Monday afternoons phone call days or check in days. And the reality is, more often than not, I'm able to get all of that stuff fit in that little container on Monday afternoons. And again, that doesn't mean that that recipe is going to work for you, but the key ingredient that I would invite you to think about is making data informed decisions. Another data informed decisions. If, for example, if you were an educator and you get sick every single March break or every single spring break, I would get really proactive about looking at those few weeks leading up to it. And can you like put in and schedule a wee bit of recovery? Maybe that's when you can like you go ahead and pre-book that massage, pre-book, a dinner with friends if that's restorative for you. Like, actually get out ahead of it. And we often talk about this in my work as cope ahead of time, right? So if I know I'm going to have a busy week, like a lot of travel, a lot of moving parts, meeting a lot of people, I do my best to make sure before that week I get outside in nature. Like, again, we don't have to go like hugging up to trees, but I mean, just make sure I spend an extended period of time outside. I aim for 60 to 90 minutes in green spaces, even in the winter, because the research shows that if you can be outdoors for about 60 to 90 minutes in nature, which could even involve shoveling your driveway at this point, what happens is it boosts your immune system for up to 7 days. So I go into these busy weeks knowing that I've like recharged my immune system. So when that person coughs next to me on a plane, yes, I still get cringed, but I don't like I'm cooked. It's not like, okay, there's no hope for me. Right? Same as before I get on the plane, making sure I'm having taking some zinc, right? Like, those are data informed decisions that are relevant to the things that I'm trying to achieve, things that I'm trying to experience. The other idea to invite here is, I notice a lot of times when we think about New Year's, it's this kind of idea that it's like we're wiping the slate clean in the good old tabula rasa. In psychology, the notion, there was a group of psychology persons years and years ago who held this notion of tabula rasa, which is this idea we are born blank slates. And we all know that that is not the case. There's a lot of genetic influences. We know that nurture and nature, all of these things come into conversation. We are not blank. And there was even an experiment that was done. And my goodness, the experiments that they got away with in the like 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s in psychology, that stuff would never fly today, thankfully. However, there was this one particular experiment that was called Little Albert, and in an attempt to show that this belief of tabula rasa, this kind of whole like really kind of rigid view of behaviorism, was this idea that like we can like train or create or inhibit any behavior because we're all born with blank slates. And they actually did this horrible study to Little Albert where they actually made him like petrified of things that were white. There was like this white bunny, like it was just really twisted kind of idea. But again, they were trying to prove that like we can like make this person like the next president, or we can actually make this person like unhomed, right? Like it's just all about influence of behavior. As we know, this is way bigger than that. However, I think that there's this like tendency that January is this like maybe this kind of shadow belief or culture that it's like it has to be a complete fresh start. And for some people, heck yeah, we want a fresh start. We want to wipe the slate clean, start fresh. Here we go. But I do hold space that there's probably some things from last year or beyond, but like last year that could serve you if you like bring them with you. Like bringing in the wisdom, like bringing in those hard-earned lessons. We don't want to waste a mistake. And this idea that it's like we're always starting at zero. Well, no, we're starting with this amazing repository of lived experiences and insights and ideas and all these different ways that perhaps work and maybe some ways that don't work. So open yourself. I would invite you to open yourself to kind of bringing in, what deserves to come with me. Right? Take the driver's seat, take the ownership, have that agency to say, okay, what deserves to come with me? What will be something that I want to bring forward that it worked really well for me? I know one of my big takeaways, I've had so many lessons learned in 2025. Like, I mean, like learning explosions for me in 2025. And again, they could do a whole episode on all the learnings if you want to hear some of them. But one of the keys that I share here is I really have rediscovered, I think, my capacity to hold space for difficult conversations. When I was a lot younger, I felt like I could do difficult conversations really well. Like I actually felt like that was one of my little super skills, that I was okay to like be in that discomfort of a difficult conversation. And I really think when I spent some time with it, I think because I've just been kind of immersed in this idea that like nobody likes to have difficult conversations and nobody's really good at difficult conversations, that I realized, yeah, this is gross. This doesn't feel good. And of course, I'm not suggesting that the majority of difficult conversations are exciting and wonderful, but I lost sight of the fact that A, I can have them, and B, it's like on the other side of that difficult conversation is like there's just so many more opportunities. Like there's just in some cases it could be relief, it could be ease. And I don't think we necessarily keep a running tally of how much some of this like noise and like maybe a little bit of procrastination in terms of even protest behavior, in terms of what that looks like, in terms of not having these difficult conversations. My gosh, it takes up so much cognitive energy. It just takes up so much mental real estate. And we spend so much time doing this like mental and emotional gymnastics when so often it's just like sit down and do the thing. And one of the keys that helped me get back to trusting my capacity for difficult conversations was that one tip that I shared on an earlier episode around no small talk. As somebody who wants to make people like I don't want to ever hurt anybody. I don't want to ever be uncomfortable. And in my attempt to do that kind of Oreo sandwich, here's everything's amazing. This is what's horrible. You're great. In that like practicing delivering feedback with the sandwich method where it's like positive, negative, positive. I realized that the positive was like becoming too big, that I would half the time not get to the negative thing. And then it would be so out of context for me to bring it up at that point. So I abandoned the sandwich method of feedback. I went to the principles that how do I like to take difficult feedback or difficult conversations? Clear, quick, and short. Sweet Jesus, short. I do not want to sit in 60 minutes and marinate in the uncomfortableness of a difficult conversation. Like sweet and short and sweet with no small talk. Hey, I'm going to give you a piece of feedback. You're not going to like this. That's okay. I'm open to having a conversation. This is what I need you to hear. Like no small talk, just get right to the work. And again, it could be in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then allow people to move on. Like almost like free ourselves, give ourselves permission that we don't have to go back and revisit all of the things. No small talk, super short and sweet. That's one of the takeaways from 2025. And what I'm super happy to report, I feel as though I was able to like batch a lot of those difficult conversations. So I feel, oh my gosh, I am so energized going into 2026 with like clear skies ahead. I know there'll be bumps. I know there'll be turbulence. That's part of flight. I'm okay with that, but I'm not bringing things into 2026 because I couldn't show up for them in 2025. And my friends, if I could offer any like advice, and I often stay away from advice, it's often invitations, have the difficult conversation. It is so worth it. It is so worth it to be on the other side where it feels like open runway, you have clear skies. And yeah, other stuff is going to come up, but we're not like bringing things, right? We don't have to keep doing it. It's like that kind of doing said, CPR on a dead horse. I know that's exactly not the expression doing CPR on a dead horse, but I realized I was doing a lot of CPR and things that just needed to be let go of. Hope that's useful. Okay, so let's circle back for just a heartbeat around this idea that habits don't stick because we want them bad enough. Why I think that is so relevant is as somebody who's navigated addiction, this has nothing to do with wanting it bad enough. This has everything to do with being able to identify what are the cues, what are the triggers to that behavior. It has everything to do of what service or what function is the behavior doing, and also around real energy and capacity. When we think of behavior, when we think of good behavior, bad behavior, and we've talked about this a lot about the fact that it's not a moral issue, good behavior, bad behavior. I know there is a component of morality to it, but the majority of the habits that we talk about are either habits that get us closer to our goals or habits that get us farther away from our goals. And if you look at the structure, or what we call like the anatomy of a habit, we have a clear trigger, and then we have a behavior, right? That something happens and we respond. Now, there are also reflexes involved in that as well. So we're talking about that spaciousness between the antecedent and the behavior where we have some choice. We're not talking about the reflex behaviors, just so we're clear. And when we think about it, so we have this cue, we have this behavior, and then all of a sudden it's going to be the reward. And there's four types of reward. There's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, there's positive punishment, and then there's negative punishment. Like this is like old school operant conditioning. And what's interesting is that it happens very, very quickly. The closer the reward, again, any of those four, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment, what happens, it happens like the closer it happens to the behavior, the stronger the relationship is going to be. The deeper, the stronger. And again, we've talked about this before. Then the repetitions get involved, that myelin sheathing gets super smooth. And then that way it becomes like our go-to, right? It becomes our go-to. And that repetitiveness is what makes it easier. It makes it easier for those behaviors to stick. So, why I'm sharing this with you, again, all behavior serves a purpose. Absolutely every single behavior people does achieve, perform, all of it. It all serves a purpose. We don't do anything for no reason. So again, even like, avoiding a difficult conversation, right? That's actually a behavior, right? The avoidance is actually a behavior. Taking the, different routes when we're like driving or we're commuting, right? Like there's some that feel like we're on autopilot because we've done it so often. And the research is actually quite fascinating. There's some research that shows like on average, like 45% of our behaviors on autopilot, and in some cases, it's up high as 90% of our behavior is on autopilot. And an example for that would be like, have you ever noticed that, like say you're driving home and all of a sudden you like pull in your driveway and you're like, wow, I don't even remember that drive. Like, I hope I made good choices. When we experience mastery in any area, we're more likely to be on autopilot. So again, just thinking about our behaviors, not from good or bad. And just as a little caveat, when we call it positive or negative punishment reinforcement, it's positive not because it's good. positive, it's because we're adding something. It's negative because we're taking something away. This isn't good or bad. It's we're adding something. We're adding a positive punishment, right? So we're adding something or we're removing something, and that becomes a punishment. And that goes for, again, all four of those quadrants. So looking at our behavior, just getting curious, right? Like just getting super duper curious about, wow, I'm curious, where is this being rewarded? So for example, if, you have the best of intentions to, make sure you get a good night's sleep and then you go to bed early, but then you sit there and scroll for hours. Okay, that's cool. You're human. It's literally a little dopamine dry drip, right? Like you literally are getting dopamine at your fingertips. It makes sense why we do this. Why, where is it being rewarded? Right. So if we know that scrolling, the act of scrolling, bright lights, new content, anticipation, numbing behavior, like all of those things, of course, that's going to be a whole bunch of positive reinforcement, right? Because we're adding all of these things that are making us feel better. So, again, just getting really curious about looking at it, not good or bad. We've already talked about that. But where is it being reinforced and rewarded or punished or not being punished, right? And again, this isn't around judgment. This is simply about becoming this little kind of detective in your own life. So often, so many people, sorry, that was not a proper sentence. Often people say to me, like, Robyne, this behavior, I don't even know, like, it just happens. I didn't even like, so yeah, autopilot. But then also they think it's like this mystery. It is a mystery how this is happening. I don't even know how I got myself in this predicament. Well, let's say, for example, there's lots of delicious snacks at nighttime. It's your favorite go to. No judgment. Again, remember, nobody like curls up with tuna at the end of the day. There's a reason why we love carbohydrates at nighttime. Well, it's because our cortisol levels are so high. So if we, for example, address our cortisol earlier in the day in a different way, would you still have those sugary cravings at night? Probably not. Probably not. We know from a biological perspective, you wouldn't have the craving. However, the cue of sitting on the comfy couch, getting cozy, getting the blanket, watching your favorite shows, that all has perhaps been associated with that. So again, we just want to start pulling and untethering some of this behavior because again, ultimately we're in the driver's seat. We have agency over our behavior. And one of the kind of quick little grab and go ideas we can share here is that instead of being like, "Oh man, I did it again," or "Man, look at this." It's just notice like, "Oh, I noticed I'm leaning towards this," or "I noticed." Like just putting it in as that observational piece because self-awareness is the super skill when it comes to human behavior. Like catching yourself doing it. And then when you find yourself making a wise decision that's in line with your goals, reinforce the heck out of it. Reinforce the heck out of it. And this is one of the bazillion reasons why I love sports is because, for example, just this morning, Ava said something. We're having a little family huddle. Everybody's sitting around and Ava said something and Hunter was like, "Yes, Ava, two claps for Ava." And like we all clapped, we were like, boom, boom, two claps for Ava. So I realized that like, if you look at some of the practices in terms of sport and reinforcement, like do that in our own lives outside of the sport arenas, outside of that context, it still feels pretty good, right? So, hey, look, I filled up my water bottle, two claps for me, right? Doing things that like actually are a little bit fun because at the absolute end of the day, this is this big kind of system that is so beautiful and it's so deep and it's hard and it's plentiful and there's all of these parts to the human condition. And ultimately, we get one go. We get one go at this. Now, if I was to sum up, okay, promise I'm landing this plane. If I was to sum up 2025 in one idea, this is what it would be. We are all in a scavenger hunt, freaking out, moving about, scuttling around, doing our thing. We are all in this massive scavenger hunt and no one remembers what we're looking for. That is what 2025 was when I again working with people all around the world, hundreds of thousands of people, which is just, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how many people I've been able to work with directly and indirectly. This is a big scavenger hunt and nobody remembers what we're looking for. That artificial sense of urgency. So my invitation going into 2026, let's as a collective, hey, or just you and me, let's decide if we're in this big scavenger hunt, what is it we're looking for? And I think, and how I want to frame 2026, and I'm going to invite you personally to do it with me, we're looking for hope. We are looking for hope. Now, for some of you may be like, wow, Robyne, that's very on brand because you have a new book about hope coming out. Yes, very true. And it's what I see that's making the biggest difference for people. And I am so excited to just like share and gift and be all in this hope filled space with you going into 2026 because it is absolutely the antidote to what is wrong in the world right now. And you might be like, wow, that's a pretty bold claim. I'm backing it up. Join me in 2026 as we do just that. Come with me on this exploration. Come with me into this practice. Come with me as we jump into this giant scavenger hunt that is humanity, that is 2026. And come with me and let's find hope. I think it's going to be amazing because it is absolutely time to get our hopes up. Thanks for listening. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.